at some point, and the prosecution hasn't said it yet, but they're going to have to. They're going to have to tell you that what they're really asking you to do, just say it. What they're really asking you to do is to convict Dr. Murray for the actions of Michael Jackson. And I'm going to, we've been dancing around this for 6 weeks, maybe 2 years. Somebody's got to say it. Somebody's got to tell the truth. Somebody's got to just say it. If it were anybody else but Michael Jackson, anybody else, would this doctor be here today? The jury instructions tell you that in order to convict Dr. Murray, you would have to believe, from a criminal negligence standpoint, that his actions amounted to a disregard for human life, indifference to the consequences. Now, you met Dr. Murray's patients. You saw Ruby Mosley and Jerry Causey. You saw Andy. You know what Dr. Murray did for these people, that they're willing to drive down here, fly down here, get up on the stand in front of all these cameras. Does Dr. Murray, did he appear to you from these witnesses who, by the way, Mr. Waldron decided to poo-poo because they've only been patients for 10 years, and Dr. Murray only treated him in 2003. Did these people appear to you to believe, people that know Dr. Murray best, that Dr. Murray has an indifference to the consequences of his act? That he has a disregard for human life? I encourage you to please listen to the entire interview of Dr. Murray. Not snippets. Don't just take 5 words. Listen to the whole interview, please. And you listen to how he says things. You listen to what he says about how he feels about Michael Jackson, about how he's always felt about Michael Jackson. And you listen, and by the way, Mr. Waldron telling you that Dr. Murray just made the statement because he's trying to get ahead of the curve, ahead of the police. If Dr. Murray's trying to get ahead of the police, why did Dr. Murray tell the police that for 60 days he's giving Michael Jackson propofol infusions? Don't you think Dr. Murray could have come up with since we're all so brilliant, we're tricking the police, don't you think he could have come up with a better story? This is criminal negligence. This is the definition of criminal negligence. The prosecution has shown negligence in many different respects. One of the disturbing things about what Mr. Waldron told you was, as I told you, what he said about substantial, as opposed to having to prove direct. This is actually what he's going to have to prove to convict Dr. Murray. This is the actual jury instructions. These are the 3 questions that I submit to you that as you go through the list of negligent acts, and as I recall, Mr. Waldron pointed to propofol in the home. He pointed to failure to obtain medical records. I'm assuming you wrote this down. These are the 3 questions that you need to ask yourself in every single one of those scenarios. Did Dr. Murray commit criminal negligence? Number 1, with that act. 2, is it the direct cause of Michael Jackson's death? And it's defined for you in the charge. This is your charge. Whatever I tell you is essentially irrelevant. What Mr. Waldron tells you is irrelevant. This is your charge. And you will see exactly what you need to look at. And finally, is it the natural and probable consequence of the act? Taking into account intervening circumstances. Mr. Waldron has told you that Dr. Murray, he's going to have to get up here, and he's going to have to tell you that, okay, maybe the drip theory was a bad one, and it doesn't work. He's going to have to. Because he's not going to point to the fact that there were baggy pants and say that that's any evidence whatsoever that Dr. Murray took one thing from the house, a wet tubing, left a bottle, left the bags. He took one thing, picked up things in front of paramedics, right in front of them, but took one thing. It's absurd. So what he's going to say on rebuttal is, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, because it doesn't matter. And one of the things he pointed to are these doctors that got up on the stand. And they sat up here. And they looked down on Dr. Murray, and they said, I would have done it differently. I would have done things differently. It is easy, in hindsight, to sit up and point the finger at your colleague and say whatever the prosecution wants you to say. It's easy to do that, especially when you're Dr. Murray, who has to walk through this world painted as a villain for everything that he does. It's easy in hindsight to say that he's a lousy doctor. But these doctors, Dr. Kamengar, Dr. Steinberg, and Dr. Schaefer, have never been in the shoes of Conrad Murray. Ever. It's easy to make those statements when you've never walked in that man's shoes. It's easy to make those statements when you've never had a patient and a friend like Michael Jackson. And it's easy to make those statements when you have a minuscule amount of compassion compared to Dr. Murray. You can judge Dr. Murray for what he did, but don't question his motives. Dr. Murray, his greatest personality defect is his greatest character strength. He got brought into this situation because he thought he could help. Because he thought he could help. He could help Michael Jackson succeed. He could help him sleep normally. He believed that. He was wrong. He was wrong. Because Dr. Murray had no control over this situation. Because what was happening in the background, he was just a little fish in a big, dirty pond. The prosecution says it's bizarre what Dr. Murray did with the 911 call. Bizarre. That's what he said. Bizarre. And Dr. Steinberg sat up here and he told you, Steinberg and Kamengar and Schaefer, and they told you, the first thing you do when you find your patient dying on the bed in front of you is you call 911. First thing you do. Really? Really? You're a doctor in a private residence. Your one patient is lying on the bed, unable to breathe, his eyes open, he looks like he's dead. You have no idea why. None. You're a cardiologist and you're trained in advanced life support. And the first thing you do is you pick up the phone and call 911? Would anybody do that? Anybody?